for the record, the applicant and applicant's attorney and I have agreed to share the take down cost in the court.
One question, Councilman, before we proceed. Okay, I'll call the public hearing to order. Already read the property that is involved. I will like to make one announcement before we turn it over to the applicant. Commissioner Woods has recused himself from this, so he will not be able to participate in the discussion or the vote. All right, sir. Welcome.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Glad to have you for us. Please go right ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Andy Rotenstrike. My address is 420 20th Street North in Birmingham. I represent Verizon Wireless, here before you requesting a special use permit to place a 160-foot tall monopole tower, and I'll explain that in a minute, on property owned by Henry and Alice Mullins Farm, LP. Which is in a family partnership. We have Mary Mullins here with us, one of the daughters, here representing the landowner. Also have Ms. Frances Looney here with us. Frances is here to make sure that Verizon knows that I'm actually showed up and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So this is a 210 plus or minus acre piece of property. It's pretty big. It's been clear cut right on Highway 18 in Pine Mountain. Verizon has had some complaints from customers that they don't have coverage in that area, which, as you know, nowadays cell phones are pretty much lifelines for a lot of people. Landlines are going away. Folks are not hooking up landlines when they're moving a lot of times, and cell phone is the only means of communication. Plus, with the 4G or LTE technology you might have heard of on the television commercials and so forth, it gives high-speed broadband internet to areas of the county. So what the issue is here is Verizon has a spot that needs better coverage, and we're trying to make that coverage better for the folks that live and travel and work in that area. So what I want to do is kind of walk you through why Verizon Wireless needs the site. If I could hand these out to you, I've got a few handouts. Would that be all right, Mr. Lamb?
Yes, sir. Please do.
From the last board meeting, from the...
Unless that's different than what you submitted, they have your...
It is. I just took a few things from what I submitted.
Your highlights.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So what you have in front of you is a packet just indicating where Verizon would like to go and why the tower is needed. So the first page is a site plan. The outlined lines show the large 210-acre tract. In red, you see some dotted lines heading north-south. That would be the 30-foot wide access easement that Verizon would obtain from the Mullins down to the red square. The red square is a 100 by 100 foot lease area. So Verizon Wireless has entered into a lease with the Mullins to lease that square and the red access. The proposed pole would be in the middle of that red square. So if you turn the page, this is a drawing of the type of facility that Verizon Wireless is proposing. It's the single pole design, the monopole. It's not the big 400 or 500 foot with the guide wires that come out a quarter mile. It's not the big fat three-legged lattice tower that's got a bunch of equipment on it. When we're somewhere closer to houses and rural areas, we try and use the monopole design. So it's a single pole with no wires and just the one footing. Now, Verizon is going to build this tower, if it's allowed to be strong enough to accommodate more than just its own antennas. So at the top in red, that's where Verizon Wireless would place its antennas. But the 3 sets of antennas you see below that are for other carriers when they decide they need good service in that area. They can just come and hang their antennas on this tower and not need to come before you to build another tower. So the idea is to build one tower for all the carriers to get on. So the first thing that Verizon Wireless does when they need to add service is they identify a search area. In other words, in order to get the coverage to the geographic areas we need to get, where does our pole need to be? So they create a search area. The first thing they do is look to see if there's any existing towers in the search area. Because if so, then Verizon can just attach its antennas to that pole and we won't need to build a second pole. So when we went and looked in this area, there was no tower within the search area that Verizon Wireless could use. Now we also look for tall structures, whether it's buildings or water tanks or football stadium lighting. We do that at high schools quite often. And there was just nothing here that we could use. So because there was no existing structure that could give us the coverage we need, our only option is to request to build a new pole, which brings us here tonight. The next page kind of gives you an indication of that there are towers generally in the area, but they're several miles apart. So the yellow dot in the center, from which all the lines extend from, is the proposed site. You can see the sites, or the blue dots, are existing Verizon Wireless sites. They may not be Verizon Wireless poles, but Verizon Wireless has antennas on those sites. And then another site to the west of our proposed site is a planned site, which will either has been applied for, or will be applied for, or has been approved. So there are other towers in the area, but we already have coverage on them, so putting antennas on those wouldn't get the coverage in the area we need. And that's why we need the pole where we're requesting it. Now the next page is the same map actually, with the coverage on those existing sites turned on, and that's where the green, red, and yellow colors come into effect. Again, the blue dots are existing Verizon Wireless sites. The green is coverage for Verizon Wireless from those existing towers. The green is what we're striving for. That's what we commonly refer to as in-building coverage. So if you're in anywhere in the green, that means your Verizon Wireless device, whether it's a cell phone, iPhone, iPad, laptop, computer, will work inside a building like we're in now. Now as you get further away from the blue dots, the radio signal, like any radio signal, dissipates and gets weaker. And you get into the yellow areas, which we commonly refer to as in-vehicle coverage. So in the yellow areas, you may have coverage in your vehicle, but you're not going to have consistent coverage in a building. And then as you get into the red areas, that's when you have to go outside and try and connect the call, which usually doesn't connect anyway. So what we're trying to do is make the red and the yellow turn into green. That's the idea. And if you turn the page, this will show the exact same map, but with this proposed site we're here about tonight turned on. And you can see how that one pole gets coverage in a large part of that area of the county. So that's why we need the coverage. Now the last page I wanted to show you was an aerial photograph. The yellow push pin is the location of the proposed tower. That tree line is actually the property line running north-south. And just wanted to show you how close the next residential dwelling was, which is almost 1,000 feet, 942 feet to the nearest house. Of course, you got a lot of woods between the house and the tower. So that kind of indicates why Verizon needs the coverage. Now, there are special use permit requirements that you have in your ordinance that we have to meet, and we think we've met all of them. There's 7 of them. Number 1, the height of the proposed tower. We're asking for 160 feet. It'll have a 10-foot lightning rod on it, so it'll be a total of 170 feet total. That's the minimum height that Verizon needs to get that green coverage that I showed you in that map. So we're only asking for what we need. We're not trying to build a 300 or 400 foot tower like you see along the interstates trying to blast the coverage. We're only asking for what we need. The next thing you look at is the proximity to residential structures. We're over 5 times or even more the height of the tower from the nearest residential structure, and there's a sufficient amount of woods in between there so that that resident will not see this tower. The proposal right now is for the tower not to be lit. And I'll get into more of this later, but as a general rule, the FAA does not require towers under 200 feet to be lit unless they're in a flight path. The FAA, which I'll get into in a few minutes, has said we do not have to light this tower. So from an aesthetic standpoint, nobody will see this tower at night. And because of the sufficient wooded area, they're not going to see the base part of it during the day anyway, and because it's so far off the street. So the third thing to look at is the nature of uses on nearby properties, which is agricultural and residential. Again, the closest residence is 942 feet away. The fourth thing to look at is surrounding topography. Again, it's a rural area, mainly flat with some gently rolling hills, which kind of dictates the need for the coverage. You know, our signal doesn't roll along with the hills. It's what we call a line of sight signal. So when it hits a mountain or a hilltop, it stops. And so in order to get to the other side of the mountain, you got to build a site on the other side. So we have, that kind of helps dictate where we place the towers. The next thing is surrounding tree coverage. To the west, to the east was all woods, as you saw, with tall pine trees. And there's no houses for well over 2,000 feet to the west and to the south. Next is the design of the tower. As I showed you on that earlier picture, we're doing the single pole design, keeping it as low as we can, not doing the big tall with the guide wires, and not doing the 3-legged lattice tower. And the last is the availability of other suitable structures. And that's why I wanted to show you the search ring, and that there were no other towers in the area that we could use. So we think we've met the 7 criteria that is set forth in your ordinance. Now, I know there's been some discussion with regard to the nearby airport. And there's been some concerns about safety, and of course, nobody wants to put a tower in a place that's going to be unsafe. Every cell tower that gets built in this country has to go through various federal approvals, one of which is with the FAA. Now, the FAA is kind of the supreme law of the land when it comes to air traffic safety. They do studies and they tell us whether something, is allowed to go, and if so, how high. So this tower with the coordinates was submitted to the FAA, and the FAA issued what we call a determination of no hazard to air navigation. And the FAA said, you can build this structure up to 170 feet. And that's what we're proposing. They didn't say you can build it however high you want. The FAA says you can only build this. You can't build it to 171, you can only build it to 170. And that's the height we're proposing. A 160-foot pole with a 10-foot lighting rod. I've got several copies of this. Do you guys have this? It was submitted in the application.
Yes.
And so you've seen this? Okay. So I won't take the time here now. So we came to the Planning Commission last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, and some concerns were raised by the local airport and by some pilots about whether the FAA took into consideration a plan for a runway extension, which I didn't know about before the hearing, but I think is a very good point. So between the meeting last week or 2 weeks ago and tonight, I called the FAA. I called the person who signed off on this FAA determination. His name is Earl Nuwalu. I reached Earl's boss, and I had him look at this. I said, did the FAA take into account the proposed extension of the Harris County runway when it did its determination? And I'd like to hand out the email that I got in response. So Chris Shoulders is Earl Nuwalu's boss at the FAA. And Chris is located in the Fort Worth, Texas FAA office. And his first sentence kind of answered my question I had. And he's addressing it to me in an email that came out last week. Sir, reference our earlier conversation. I can assure you the proposed 1,000-foot runway extension was considered during the obstruction evaluation process, which is the process they use to determine whether to issue an FAA determination of no hazard. He goes on to state the group that did the report, and he indicates, he gives this map, which is on the front page, which I actually blew up so you could see it better on the last page. So this map on the last page is the same map on the front page. And what he was referencing to prove that the extension was considered is if you look at the solid blue line, which is the runway, you can see the dotted blue line to the west. That is the runway extension portion that was considered by the FAA. Now the runway extension wording in the arrow I added so you could see it. But if you look back on the front page, this was the clean email he sent me. You can see it a little closer as well. Secondly, he attached what he calls the CFR 14 Part 77 report, which is the 4-page report attached as well. And if you look on page 2, where it says runway 0927, about 3 lines down it says this is a proposed runway. So according to the FAA, the runway extension was considered with regard to this issuing this determination of hazard. So with that said, we think we've met the burden and the requirements of your ordinance. We think we've addressed all the safety concerns that were had. We want to make sure that we're not putting a tower up that's going to be a hazard to air navigation. The FAA tells us we're not, even with the extension. I also wanted to go back to Verizon and say, what can we do to try and mitigate any other concerns? We have the FAA telling us they already considered the extension. So Verizon Wireless agreed to allow me to offer up for us to light the tower, which we'll do voluntarily to make it easier for the pilots to see it. That's an added expense to Verizon. It gets in monthly electric bills and all that, but we're happy to do that. And we're also, because this property is large enough, and because Ms. Mullins was kind enough to let us do this, Verizon said that if we can get this through tonight, that we would be able to move the tower 1,000 feet to the west. The proposed runway extension is 1,000 feet towards the west. So as the runway moves this way, we would move the tower the same amount of feet that way. So that's our proposal, to light it, to move it. That allows us to stay on the same piece of parcel, which is the Mullins tract, for which we already have a lease agreement in place. So it doesn't move us to another piece of property where we gotta see if there's another willing landowner and go through another lease process. And a lot of the other federal requirements that we have to meet, since we're on the same track, we can still kind of keep our time frame for moving forward. So in an effort to compromise, we're allowed to offer that tonight. So with that said, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer.
Let me ask our attorney a question.
Yes, sir. Mr. Lane?
Yes.
I also wanted to show you guys this if I could. As I indicated earlier, when new towers are requested, they're requested usually because coverage is needed. And the way Verizon knows coverage is needed in certain areas usually begins, quite frankly, with customer complaints. We had some folks show up at the Planning Commission meeting, and I believe some of them are here tonight, in favor of this tower out there. And they brought with them tonight a petition signed by some 54 folks that live out in that area requesting approval of the tower because they need coverage out there. Like I said earlier, this is going to be their only means of communication. I think some of them might even want to speak to you tonight, but I want you to know this petition was here. This is the only copy I have, so with your permission, I'd like to give it to Ms. Looney, and she can make copies for both of us. Is that all right?
Yeah,
But I'm happy to pass it around if you'd like to see it.
Yeah, we would need a copy.
Okay. Or if we can make copies in the back tonight, that'd be fine. That'd be great.
Good.
Yeah, once you hand it, and you could just let them see it, and then we make copies. Thank you. So I'm sorry, if you have any questions,
I have one thing that a little, it could cause some confusion.
Yes,
so I want to clarify because we were open on this thing. The approval on page 2 of 4, while you say you asked FAA if they had used the expansion,
Yes, sir.
extension. But yet, what you have here shows the length at moving to 5,502 feet.
That's right.
Our current runway is 5,002 feet.
Right.
So we are while they only have record of the 500, we are actively moving to go the 1,000 feet. So I just wanted, and you
Absolutely.
referenced that, you moved the tower 1,000 feet
That's right.
because of the 1,000-foot extension, but that will run it to 6,002 feet, and it may change that location, the blue dot.
And you're exactly, and that's why I was able to get Verizon to move it 1,000 to take care of that 500-foot gap. But yes, sir, you're exactly
I just
right.
wanted to make sure that we were
No,
all on the
absolutely.
same page.
Yes, sir.
So, okay. All right, so those are your comments at this point in time.
Yes, sir.
I will then receive comments from those individuals here who wish to speak in favor of this special use permit application. Those who wish to speak in favor. All right, no one here wishes to speak in favor of that?
Do we need to come down?
Yes, ma'am. Come up and state your name and your address, and
My name is Neva Bone. I live at 196 Hidden Lake Court, right off of Nelson Road, about a mile and a half from the proposed tower. We have no coverage whatsoever in our house. Our alarm system can't be hooked up. We have the cell phone, like in case your phone goes out or the power's cut by a burglar. And I think that some people have commented in the petition too about when you have company come and it's so embarrassing in 2017 for them to have to get in their car and drive 3 miles to near 185 to get a signal or go into town. And I had we rode around in town to see where signals were. I know some people say, well, I got good coverage out where we live. Well, we rode out there. They had 3 bars with LTE. And they had good coverage, but where we are, we're in a hole. And all these people that signed the petition the same way. And it would just help so much. Sure, we're in a new age where people, but you've got to have your internet now. We go to MD Anderson. We can't even, you have to do everything online now. And it's just, it's a sad situation in this day and age that you have to go in your car and go into town and go down the road. And that's all I have to say.
okay, thank you, Ms. Bone.
I've only got one thing to say.
Your name, sir?
My name's Lyman Bone, B-O-N-E. I live at the same address, Mr. Woods. How would y'all like to live at your house to work when you wanted to use your cell phone? you got in your car and drove up on the driveway, you got up on Highway 18 to call for help. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Thank you, Ms. Bell.
Hello,
No, Mayor.
I'm Mary Mullins. I'm here with my sister Ann and one of my brothers, John. Three of us, along with two other brothers, are the owners. We own Henry Dallas Mullins Farm LP, which is named in honor of our parents. We are allowing Verizon to put the tower on our property because we feel it's a safety issue. A lot of people out there do not have coverage. When we drive out there, there's no coverage, or very little coverage. We have hunters on property out there. I fear for them if they ever do get hurt and can't call for help, because they may be stuck in the woods and nobody knows it. So, that's, if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Ms. Bell.
Thank you.
Anyone else here wish to speak in favor of this application? All right, then I will now entertain comments from those who wish to speak against this application. Any who wish to speak against this application? Yes, sir. Name and address, please.
Good evening, my name is John Kilgore. I'm a resident of West Point. I'm a pilot, aircraft owner. I keep my aircraft at the Harris County Airport, Hangar 1A. I'm a part-time contract corporate pilot. I'm also a flight instructor. I'm a professional pilot. And I've been a pilot since 1977. I've been flying aircraft for 40 years. I've also kept my airplanes at Pine Mountain Airport off and on for the last 30 years. And I'd like to speak against this particular sighting of this particular antenna. I don't have a problem with Verizon company. I've got multiple accounts myself. I've got a family member that works for Verizon. So I'm not averse to Verizon installing and building, constructing antennas. However, the particular sighting of this aircraft, this antenna, I feel represents a hazard aircraft, not under ideal conditions, not under fair weather conditions like we had today, but under inclement weather conditions when aircraft might be attempting to get into the Pine Mountain Airport on an instrument approach. There's only two existing instrument approaches to the Pine Mountain Airport. Both of them are runway 9, so they approach from the west. One is a GPS, what we call a RNAV, which is area navigation equipment. There's two types. There's a legacy equipment that is based on VOR technology, or VHF omnidirectional radio beacon, the nearest one of which is up at near the LaGrange Airport on West Point Lake, approximately 7 miles northwest of LaGrange Airport. And because of that, and also the next closest one was the Columbus Airport, but the Columbus antenna, Columbus VOR, has been shut down by the FAA because they're transitioning away from that older technology. The other approach is, of course, the GTS localizer with performance with vertical guidance, what we call a WAS, or wide area augmentation signal precision approach. For those aircraft that are, one of those radios installed starts at about $10,000 and contract to put in a $20,000 airplane. But large corporate aircraft will certainly have that equipment and technology, and so it doesn't pose much of a problem for them. With the smaller aircraft, most of which are already based at Pine Mountain, most of which do not have this advanced technology, but they're using the legacy technology under inclement conditions with low visibility, low clouds, which is where it will become the problem. It becomes a problem because once an aircraft actually descends below the cloud base and gets a visual contact on the airport, then you're looking at required visibility of only 1 mile and stay out of clouds, which means that you may have to actually go down. In which that's the time when a tower of this size and its location poses an obstacle hazard. Is that an aircraft coming in gets under clouds, gets the runways in sight, which since the clearing, the improvements on the runway, the improvements on the lighting, means that instead of seeing the airport, when you're practicing on top of it, you can see it from 2 to 3 miles out under inclement condition. But the problem is, that puts the tower out of your field of view. It's like under the side of your hood. It'd be very much like somebody putting a 3-foot concrete cone in the middle of the road beside your driveway. Under conditions where you've got good conditions, you can see where you're going daytime. You know it's there, you probably avoid it. But one night when it's bad weather and you're in a hurry to get to town, get to church, go to the hospital, you're backing out of your driveway, and bam, you never see it. And so that's my concern. The other thing is that a tower of that size, that location, poses a bird hazard. We're blessed with 2 different species of vultures in this area, turkey vultures and black vultures. And there's a large population of them because they're protected species. And such obstruction, or such structure provides a roost, natural roost for them. And so adding to the bird hazard, we've already had aircraft at the Pine Mountain Airport have structural damage from contacting a buzzer. One aircraft had a wing impacted, and $30,000 airplane had to have a $15,000 repair. So we're not talking about insignificant damage from a single bird impact and potential hazard of life, because there has been life lost. So those are my 2 objections from siting that particular antenna to this particular location. And moving it 1,000 feet west is not going to mitigate the problem. Moving it perhaps a mile west, a mile south, or a mile north would mitigate the problem. So that's my concern. Thank you for your time and allowing me to address the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Goodrow, appreciate that.
I would like to speak
Sure.
against it as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Murray Bradley. I live at 394 Sunset Drive, Pine Mountain, Georgia, 31822. I live about between an eighth and a quarter of a mile from the runway itself. And I live on Sunset Drive, which is off Sky Meadow. I started as a young man flying at South Louisville Skyport in 1963, 64. Worked there, serviced the aircraft on the line. While I haven't been a pilot in command for a number of decades, I did fly during my younger years. I've supported the activities of the airport. I support what the commission has done with the airport because it's become a center of economic contribution, I think, to the county. And the leadership, I think, of Bill Champlin has been a good leadership. I'm aware and have met a number of the trainers for a number of the flight schools, including the one out of Newnan that's training a great deal of the international pilots that will fly the majority of the aircraft in China. There are other schools. There's the Auburn University School of Aviation. There are others that fly in using on cross-country tracks. This airport is one of the major north-south transit points from not only the Caribbean, but all of South Florida, Middle Florida, North Florida, all the way up to the Canadian border. So you have transient pilots flying from north to south, and from the west to the east of the United States, all the way up to Boston. We've seen people come through. It's been my experience that these student pilots, while they're trying to learn the rules, and it's like a kid riding a bicycle the first time. There's going to be falls, there's going to be accidents. There's going to be missed opportunities for following the flight patterns and the rules. So when I look at this situation, I'm not objecting to Verizon, and I certainly feel for people that need the telephone service. I certainly think that this presents, and if I were a commissioner, I would never want to sign on what I think could be a building of an obstacle that could present a clear and present danger for student pilots, some of which get down so low that you'd think that they're flying their wings through the squirrel nest from time to time. They don't mean it, but it happens. And as John Kilgore said, you have opportunities at times with major aircraft, including jets with multi-passengers. They have to come in inclement weather, and everything's fine as long as the instrument panel is lit. But if something happens, such as a lightning strike, then you got a different scenario altogether. I think this presents a clear and present danger that I would not be in favor of signing off on. There is a clear and present solution which the council could explore to move this tower 3/4 to a mile to the north. And while I know it's going to be some expense on renegotiating a property thing, I would recommend this commission turn down this request. One aviation aircraft accident could not only involve the aircraft itself, it could fall on my house, you know, it could fall on a number of people, a number of neighborhoods which are close by, including the neighborhoods of Callaway. So we're not talking about an insignificant possibility of a danger presenting itself. And that's all I got to say. I certainly think, and would applaud, you know, if it gets built, that there needs to be a light on this. There's no question about that. And certainly I think in the metropolitan areas, you see almost every structure, over 100 feet, you normally see a light at the top that warns the flying public. Thank you, and I would ask only one thing. I would ask council to explain to you why you couldn't move this over a mile north of the current location.
Thank you, Mr. Radley. Appreciate it. Anyone else wish to speak in opposition?
My name is Mark Bruman. I live at 316 Sunset Drive, Pine Mountain, Georgia. I'm a pilot. It's V as in Victor, R-O-O-M-A-N. I'm an instrument rated pilot. I keep an airplane at Pine Mountain. I learn to fly at Pine Mountain. I know exactly where this tower is going in. I've flown the pattern. Because generally when you're flying into an untowered airport, there's a pattern you fly. When you land on runway 9, you head, and what you look for is Highway 18, where it has the dog leg and it straightens out just past this tower. You go in there, you line up on that. About the time when you hit where the tower is going to be, you turn left, which is your base, and then you turn final and come in and land. To me, putting a tower in here is not a good idea, because if everything goes well, it's fine. 170 feet, not a big deal. You lose an engine. Or you end up getting low, then you're having to go around it, which you may not make the runway. Or if you turn too tight, you can end up making too steep of a turn and spinning out. My point is, anytime that you introduce an obstacle in the possible flight pattern of an airplane, it's not a good idea. Also with the instrument flying, if you've got the VOR Alpha, which it's called, coming from LaGrange, it passes the corridor for that approach, is where the tower is. So if you end up getting under the clouds, and once again, you may see it, you may not. I think if it's going to be there, it's imperative that it has lights. However, I would prefer not to be there. I am a Verizon customer. I would benefit from having a tower there. However, I would like to not have the risk as an airplane pilot. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Bill Champion, Harris County Airport. I stand. As we look at the airport as it's growing, in this past month we had 1,636 operations off the airport, representing 4,335 people with 8 jets. About 2 jets a week. Our fuel sales are picking up. The last month was one of the best months we've had. And the momentum seems to be working and working in our favor. And as I explained to the Planning Commission, my concern is safety. I'm all for sale, don't misunderstand me. But, I don't know if you have this in your packet or not.
Yes, they do.
This map, and, but as you can see, this is a Harris County Chamber map, and the road names are on the roads, not numbers, and off of Highway 18, where the proposed title is, you see Middlebrooks Road, Hopewell Church Road, and Hamilton Pleasant Grove Road, and the place where the tower will be, and the airport shown there, and then the flight pattern using runway 9 for takeoff and landing. As the traffic takes off to the north in the airplane, you take off and you're climbing out, and somewhere in the pink area to the east of your runway, from about 400 to 500 feet, you start a left turn. And that left turn to stay in the pattern will be a 180-degree turn, but a climbing turn, up to about 900 to 1,000 feet. And at that point, as you come out of that with a westerly heading of 270, until you get to the point of the numbers of touchdown area that you want to touch down on the runway. At that point in time, you reduce your power, reduce your airspeed, and reduce your altitude all at the same time. And how do you do that? There's ways to do it. So you start down, and then you start making your left turn to the south. That's called base leg. One of the most important legs in the turn that sets you up for a proper landing on runway 9. So as the pilot is doing that, he's staying focused on his touchdown area at the end of the runway. If it's at night, daytime, or whatever it takes, he's got to keep his reference. Then he could be within 100 feet of him. If he doesn't see his reference, he's lost. He'll be killed. So he's got to keep that reference. He's got to keep a line of sight. On a beautiful day like this, believe it or not, more people get in trouble on a day like this than they do on a bad day. I can't tell you why, but it seems to happen. A lot of students here. There's a lot of pilots that can fly the space shuttle right down to a private pilot that just has 60, 70 hours of just as green as it. And so all across the field we have to watch and be careful for. Don't violate the airspace for something that doesn't need to be there. Something that can get somebody hurt. And this is a decision you guys have got to make. And, but it's a safety point I look at. Also, I look at it as if something happens, and if it gets to where it won't really affect with our extension of the runway, then we're going to be at the stop sign, dead end. And I just think, a lot of consideration needs to be put in. Right now, as it sees, that's what we see. I'm not in favor of it. I'll work with you guys, and I'll do whatever you say to do.
Thank you, Mr. Champion. Ms. Hill?
Commissioners, thanks. It's always great to be here, and Susan, I look forward to getting to know you as well. I have a couple of handouts, if I can pass these out to y'all, and we'll get through the presentation. A lot of what I'll cover has been mentioned by these young aviators behind me, and perhaps will be underscored with the others behind them. We'll see. of aerial views. The first one's what we call an orthogonal aerial. It's basically top down, if you're looking at the runway end to the right of your paper. This trapezoid that comes off the end of this runway is the ultimate runway airspace planning surface. It's what airport planners and designers typically use to consider what obstructions might be out there. Certainly trees, could be billboards, could be high-rise condo, it could be anything. In this case, it's a Verizon cell phone tower proposal that's just at the edge of the airspace limits, but it's still there and underneath the airspace that's proposed for the 6,000-foot runway end. And that's what we're looking at. So I would like to clarify quickly that the 6,000-foot runway end has not, as Mr. Harry mentioned, has not been proposed yet to the FAA because we're still in the planning phases. So we're still looking at elevations of that potential runway end. We're looking at all of the different design standards that airport engineers and planners have to consider before we submit all of that data to the FAA for evaluation. We're in that phase at the moment. We expect within the next couple of months we'll have a task order from the county to prepare all the documents that the FAA requires in order to send that in. And then they'll have a feasibility and evaluation period. Now, we've asked for consideration for them to kind of fast track that evaluation, and we'll know more probably within the next week if they're able to do that based on the 6,000-foot runway end data. Another clarification I'd like to make quickly is that the airspace evaluation process is not, it's not an approval. It's not a permit from the FAA. There's no federal requirement that says this determination of no hazard to air navigation means that it's incumbent on y'all to approve it. So I just want to make that clear that it is an evaluation study only. It's not statutory, it's not compulsory. Particularly giving these considerations, I think, that we'll talk about here briefly. I think it's very much a local issue. It's absolutely a local issue that comes down to the balance of where we find aviation safety and, of course, cell coverage, which has its own importance as well. So if we want to flip through to the first page here, the considerations I'll ask you to think about here are primarily safety. Everything that we do at the airport in terms of development is safety is the first priority. Any airport operation that Mr. Bill undertakes or any of these pilots undertake with their students or in the course of their business, safety is paramount for the FAA, all the way down to private pilots training for sure. So going through these items that the gentleman had mentioned, the approaches, the departures, I'll just kind of show you on these graphics where those items are, where those points are that we're talking about, and the proximity and why it's so important and critical in these phases of flight. The visual approaches we already heard about are generally in good weather. Basically, it means that there's good forward visibility and there's visibility from the aircraft to the ground. That's generally what visual conditions are. And the traffic patterns are typically flooded. And I'll say typically a lot because there's always a potential where it's not. But the way the FAA flying rules state and the general practices are such that good weather equals visual conditions. Traffic patterns are conducted, just as we said, in an elliptical pattern. You'll have a previous document color-coded, and it consists of left-hand turns. So the climbing leg, as Mr. Bill stated, climb to the east, make a left turn, climbing turn for about a mile. That puts the aircraft at about a mile to a mile and a half by the time they complete that turn from the runway. And at that point, they're parallel to the runway going the opposite direction of landing. The runway is here. The plane is going this direction. East-west runway, westerly heading for the aircraft on the downwind leg. And by the time it gets ready to make another left-hand turn, the power is reduced in the aircraft. The altitude is beginning to be reduced as well. And that left-hand turn is the base leg, as mentioned, right in this vicinity of this tower, about 2 miles from the runway end. And that's a really critical phase of flight because there's so much going on close into the airport. There's a lot of things going on with the power, there's a lot of things going on with the control of the aircraft, the altitude adjustments, all of those types of things that are holding the pilot's attention. So we introduce an obstacle into the environment at that point, and it's simply a hazard. There's no real way that it's not. When there's X number of feet between the aircraft and the ground, and now there's X number of feet minus 170, that creates a hazard to any aircraft operating there. And there's no real, there's not a lot of safety margins in that area either, because there's nowhere else to turn. You could go out and extend that, but that's not typical. That's not how pilots are trained, and it's certainly not something that any pilot would want to try and accommodate for one airport in particular, because no airports do that. And also towers in good conditions are, the monopole in particular, they're not easy to see from the air. There's not a lot of contrast. Whether it's lit or unlit during the day, it's hard to see. And certainly at night, if it's unlit, it's virtually impossible to see. So the calls for having it lit, if this tower is approved ultimately, are well heated for sure. An unlit tower at night is definitely a hazard. I would say that. And Mr. John's analogy of the concrete cone at the end of the driveway is pretty apt here, given the consideration of the lack of contrast during the visual conditions. The next item of safety in my mind is instrument approaches, and I'll just describe that just for a second, trying to be a little bit non-technical here. Instrument approaches are created for when the visibility is poor. So it could be inclement weather, it could be morning fog, it could be a number of things that limits the visibility forward and down. Now these instrument approaches kind of look like highways in the sky. They are basically maps. They're routed and they're published documents that pilots have from the FAA that says, if you fly this point to this point, and you prescribe a very defined lateral place, a defined direction, and a volume of airspace, then the FAA would certify that there are no safety issues within that confined instrument approach. Again, as mentioned, pilots, we are trained, certainly we're trained what to do, we're trained how to do it, but we're consistently trained on what happens when things go wrong. That is the core of solid pilot training, and it almost always happens to everyone, particularly student pilots. Learning how to control the pitch and the power and the altitude to stay on this prescribed highway in the sky is a process. It takes hundreds of hours to master this, and I think any of the pilots, any of the aviators in the room would agree. And so when we're talking about this prescribed, certified, protected volume of airspace, we think of it, I think you have kind of a 3D angle. This is looking south, from the north looking south. And this trapezoid, 3D trapezoid it's a wedge. It's a wedge of airspace that's protected, essentially. So the simple map, the closer into the runway, the less safety margin there is, the less room for error there is. So a mile and a half out from this particular point, it might be 1,000 feet that's protected between the aircraft altitude and the ground. Closer into the airport, it might be 500 feet, it might be 400 feet. That's not a lot of room for error when we're talking about an aircraft that might be approaching at 90 or 100 knots. A larger aircraft might be approaching at 150 knots, 120 knots. The time to react, if there are ever a consideration of error, is infinitely small the closer to the airport the aircraft gets. So in terms of instrument approaches, this tower is 1.7 miles from the existing runway. It's less than a mile from the VOR Alpha approach that approaches from the lake at LaGrange, as we mentioned. That line is on this drawing as well. That is generally the route that comes from that VOR, which this is a VOR is a ground-based radio station. and an aircraft flies this highway in the sky from LaGrange, VOR, to Pine Mountain Airport, generally along this route. So we have, have traffic pattern, we have a mile or so from this VOR approach, and half a mile to 3/4 of a mile from the straight-in approach that comes in straight along the extended runway center line from the west. As we talked about, and then Mr. Bill has talked about, the future development, the 1,000-foot runway extension, something that seems to be very, very justified with the existing tenants that have moved in the last few months. A lot of the aircraft that operate at the airport now, but they take on a penalty because they don't have enough runway length to take on a full load of passengers or fuel. They can still operate there, they just can't do their entire business there. So they don't buy fuel from the airport, they have to make another fuel stop en route to wherever their ultimate destination is, or they can't operate as efficiently and at full payload because the runway is 5,000 feet. Ultimately, the 6,000 feet would be able to accommodate those aircraft. If this tower is in this proposed location, potentially, even if it's moved 1,000 feet west, it's going to hamper that future development. So all of the investment that's been put into the airport in the last few years is not going to be able to see its full potential. That utility is going to be reduced for sure. So just a quick note about the regulatory items that give y'all the authority, basically, to say, to disapprove this proposal at this time, are FAA grant assurances. Now, every time the county, as the airport sponsor, takes funds from the FAA to develop the airport, to plan or design a component of the airport, there are grant assurances that come with that money, that come with those funds, that the airport sponsor says you will protect and maintain the airport. Grant Assurance 19, regarding the operation and maintenance, and I'll let you read the relevant statements there, but basically that the airport sponsor won't cause any activity or any action to adversely affect the airport operation. This tower location does. Grant Assurance 20, hazard removal and mitigation, basically says the airport sponsor won't allow the establishment of any airport hazard, and the tower in this proposed location is indeed a hazard, ultimate hazard. FAA Grant Assurance 21, compatible land use. Land adjacent to the airport should be compatible with airport operations. A tower in this vicinity is not compatible with takeoff and landing operations, the two critical phases of flight. It's a safety hazard. And then my last point is economic, and I think Jason Johnson might speak a little bit more to this, but this is, this airport has a really special story. The county has done so much to grow and invest in this, and I think y'all have seen this in the last 2 years where you've put nearly $5 million into the airport of federal, state, and local funds. It's created, you have 30 based aircraft there now. You have charter operations. You have a very robust, a very thriving aircraft maintenance operation. You have flight training. You have public safety. You have air ambulance, and these are all critical pieces to growing your airport. They lease hangar space. They buy fuel. They base aircraft, which in turn pays personal property taxes into the county coffers. You have flying events. You have all sorts of ways to continue to generate income. And again, forward growth is the goal here. Smart, thoughtful, efficient growth. And this tower in this location just isn't consistent with that. So, welcome any questions, or
just for the
wrap
record.
it up?
Yeah, just for the record. By whom are you employed?
Yes, sir. Sorry, I'm Amanda Hill. Firm is Maesauer, M-A-E-S-A-W-Y-R. I'm an airport consultant. I'm also a private pilot and airport development project manager.
Right.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Anyone else wish to speak?
Good evening. Jason Johnston, President, Harris County Chamber of Commerce, member of the Harris County Airport Committee. and resident at 3200 Johnson Mill Road, Hamilton, Georgia. And with that address, maybe Verizon will make note, I completely am under the understanding of bad cell phone service. On my way home tonight and every night, my last few calls of the evening, about 2 miles from the house, there's a little church, and I have to make the decision if I'm going to pull off in the parking lot and complete those calls or wrap them up for the day. And I know that telecommunications is big business, is important to our county. Our commissioner's been talking about that and access to internet. Randy's been working very hard with that. We appreciate it. But I'm here tonight to kind of talk about the economics of this decision. That's what I want to share. Amanda just reminded you that since 2015, federal, state, local funds, $4.5 million in investment in our airport. In a 2011 report, the economic impact study of the airport showed a $1.8 million local benefit to the county from the airport. There's been a lot of concerns with this if we decided to go forward, don't decide to go forward with the tower, that would look at potentially being a decrease rather in impact to jet fuel sales, other fuel sales, hangar demand, training demand, and perhaps even an impact to Galloway Gardens. A lot of folks that visit the gardens fly in, and as we know, tourism is a major industry for our county. It is my understanding that the FAA has reviewed the 500-foot extension, and that's what was evaluated, not the 1,000-foot. I want to talk about the fact that we have one airport and one opportunity. You've made a major investment. You've made a significant investment in the economic outlook of our county in recent years with the development of the Northwest Harris Business Park. And the Chamber appreciates that as an opportunity to grow business, grow jobs, and better serve our community and our region. You've also made an investment in the Valley Partnership, who works alongside the Chamber and alongside the county to go after prospects for our business park. And when those prospects come in, they look at a matrix, an economic development matrix, and they look at things like access to power, water, sewer, access to interstate, to rail, and airport access. And the types of prospects that I think we're all going after are those larger industries. That's what we've developed that park for. And those folks use large airplanes, and they need that access to runways and that larger runway. As a member of the airport committee, I know that there have been discussions on the 1,000-foot extension for some time. There's prioritization, as you know, for the funds that are available each year, that they're available. And so we're not there yet, but I know it is currently under review, and that process is moving forward. So I would simply ask that the Commission carefully review this decision, along with the FAA, is not to limit the future expansion of our airport and the future expansion of the economic impact of our county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anyone else wish to speak in opposition? All right, and I will close the citizens portion of the comments. And the applicant, please feel free to make any rebuttal remarks or closing comments.
Thank you very much. A couple of points I want to make sure that we're discussing here. One of them, which I thought was an easy solution to think about, but it just wouldn't get the coverage needed, is Mr. Bradley suggesting that we move the tower 3/4 to a mile to the north or to the south. The problem with that is if you look on the maps I gave you with the green colors, that shifts the entire coverage a mile to the north or a mile to the south, which doesn't cover the intended area where the folks who have spoken tonight need coverage. So moving the tower that far, if you're going a mile, you might as well in our world be in another county, because that totally covers a different area. And if you look at the map in the first handout I gave you, the map that had the blue dots on it with the yellow, you saw lines extending out from the yellow. It shows how far away those other towers are from the proposed tower. If you look halfway between the proposed site and the site to the east, there's the airport. So there already is a tower 2 miles to the east of the airport. There's a tower 2 miles to the south of the airport. And there's a tower a little over 2 miles to the north of the airport. According to the FAA determination, which you have in your packet, our proposed tower is 12,743 feet from the airport. And that's in the FAA determination itself. That's over 2 miles. A mile's got 5,280. And it's 12,743. So I don't want to have the impression to this group that we're building it right into the runway. We're over 2 miles away, and we're actually about the same distance as several other towers are from the airport. Those have had no economic development negative impact. Why should this tower have any economic negative impact on the tower? Ms. Hill talked about safety and how the local authority, local government has the ability to protect the airport, will not allow any hazard for use of the airport, will not cause any adverse action to the airport. Well, according to the FAA, you won't by approving this tower. And whether or not the FAA determination is determinative, or whether the FAA kind of governs and controls this, it absolutely is the final say for air safety in this country. And we know that because of the law. And the law says, and our law comes from statutes and from cases. And I'd like to quote from a case that I shared with John earlier today. This is a court saying, "It is clear to this court that Congress intended to remove the field of airspace management, at least as to radio broadcast towers, from state regulatory authority," which would include counties and cities as well. Congress has expressly declared that the federal government has exclusive sovereignty over the airspace of the United States. As an exercise of its exclusive sovereignty, Congress has given the FAA the duty to determine what constitutes an efficient use of airspace and what broadcast towers present hazards to air traffic. In addition, Congress has statutorily mandated that the FAA and FCC coordinate their efforts governing the placement, construction, and location of radio broadcast towers. Pursuant to that directive, both the FAA and the FCC have promulgated detailed regulations. These regulations specifically relate to radio broadcast towers, like our cell tower, and expressly take into account the impact any proposed construction could have on VFR flight routes, visual flight routes. Thus, federal control is pervasive, and more importantly, directly covers the proposed construction, in this case, of the broadcast tower.
Did you give the site of that case?
Yes, ma'am. It is United States District Court, South Dakota, Big Stone Broadcasting, Inc. versus Lindblom, Lindblom. It's from August 27, 2001.
Booking page?
It is 161 F Sup 2nd 1009. So in addition to the FAA telling us there is no safety, Verizon has offered to do two things. Light the tower, which I think you've heard several times tonight would be preferred by the pilots, which we're happy to do, which we're not required to do by the FAA under this determination. But we would have to light the tower and move it 1,000 feet to the west if we can get approval tonight. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer.
When the FAA makes a determination that results in a letter like we received, do they do a site visit?
I don't believe so, but I do believe they send out notices to the local airports for comment.
That's not what they said, this particular proposal.
Do you know if they include elevation studies
Elevation is taken into account in making the
of
determination.
the land, not just the
That's right.
topography?
The elevation of the runway and the elevation of where the proposed tower is. Yes, ma'am. I think that's one of the main factors they look at. And that's why there's limitations on how high. They're not saying we just go build whatever we want.
No.
They're only saying we can build it this high, and that's all we're asking for.
Any other questions, commissioners, for the applicant's representative? Hearing none.
There's one thing in order to keep, just reflect the record, Michael, you have the capital improvement program for the 2018-2022 year.
I gave all those to Bill Champion, but they do have plenty.
It was adopted by the commission on 15-16.
Yes.
Let's just go ahead and put those in the record until they've been various references to the building of the runway the next couple of years, which provides the 5-year improvement plan with the runway construction to start 2020.
There's a condensed version in your packet as well that talks just about the runway development. So that means the full airport program, and there's a table just on runway.
Where you've had your opportunity to speak.
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
ma'am.
when will paperwork go in about the 1,000-foot extension?
As it's my understanding, we already have paperwork in for a 500-foot extension, and the additional 500 feet will be going in as soon as we can get in preparing for this preliminary work even ahead of this. So, yes, it will be going in.
Mr. Chairman, to close the hearing, I have
I would like to explain why I recused myself. We have both, my family has Verizon stock, a considerable amount. And the second thing is all that stock I recently put options on, and I feel it would be, the appearance of impropriety would be questioned.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, any other questions or comments for the applicant? All right, now we'll close the public hearing part. And,
yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, let me say this, and I'll make a recommendation to you. There are certain time limits with an application like this has to be made within 150 decision you have to make within 150 days of the date the application is filed. I think the application was filed on March 13th, which puts the 150 days, the way I calculated them today, to be sometime in August. There are some at the time you make a decision, whether it's tonight or whether it's later, you have to make it. It has to be put in writing. You have to make findings of fact, and it has to be supported by evidence by matters in the record. Hence, we are having this report tonight, or report in these documents that you consider will be or having in front of you will be part of the record. But you have to, once you make a decision, you have to, as the City of Roswell case, the U.S. Supreme Court says, that a denial and must be essentially contemporaneous with the substantial evidence that has may have been introduced or should have been introduced. So if you deny it, you have to move rather quickly, because the applicant, if you deny it, the applicant has 30 days in which to file a request for judicial review, and the longer you wait, the more difficult that becomes. And the City of Roswell case turned on that very issue, where they waited 28 days to make a decision after they had denied it. And the court flipped it, but because of some issues that are, ongoing, that still need to be determined by, through the FAA and through some other matters, the applicant and Andy and I have discussed this, and they are agreeable to you entertaining a motion tonight to lay this matter on the table, not make a decision tonight, to lay this matter on the table until July, the second meeting in July, which will be July the 18th, I believe. In the meanwhile, there are several issues that that probably need to be clarified with the FAA and then further discussed, and that we'll make a decision at that hearing. You will not take that July 18th meeting. You won't take any new evidence unless it is by agreement of the parties to introduce whatever evidence we feel like may be necessary based on the conclusions that may have been come up in your further inquiry. This will also not total the 150-day period that to make a decision. However, any other time limits as far as denial and the time limit for being contemporaneously being with the denial or with the approval or whatever the case may be, we agree to waive those, both parties do, and it will be, your decision will be made at that meeting if that's the motion. And that's, I recommend that to you, and it's been concurred, and concurs with that.
All right. Thank you, Council. I appreciate that. This certainly is an issue that we want to get right for our Harris County citizens, for the pilots, for Verizon. And I do think there are some questions still up in there that need to, at least, we need to feel comfortable with it.
There's no pun intended with that either, was there?
No, none at all, John, you know me. So, I would then like to make the motion that we've concluded this hearing and that we table the decision until the third Tuesday in July, our second meeting, which I believe is July the 18th. I would make that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We've got a motion and we've got a second. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor of that motion, then please signify by raising your hands. Motion carries. Okay. I thank you. I appreciate it very much.
I think that's the right thing to do.
We want to make this work for everybody.
Absolutely. Let's get the FAA's determination on that 1,000 foot.
Good. Thank you very much. Okay, we need a little time for her.
Yeah, take a couple minutes.
Take it out.